For countless millennia, it was well understood that the Disney Star Wars movies were, well...
2 hours later. A few inches later.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Shit. They were shit. But you made a video about how they were good. No, that was you, straw nerd number 15. But even among those who knew those movies were shit, there were still some who believed that The Mandalorian was actually good. And I was inclined to believe that as well, but then I actually watched it, and, well...
Gotta get that thing to step forward.
I'm thinking.
No, it's bad as well.
What? No!
But there's something here that makes people ignore the stupid. And that very thing keeps this show from being what it should be, which is a Star Wars bounty hunter show. But let's transition this intro into an explanation as to why I know this show is bad. Mando is on a snowy ice planet, and I have to say, thank God it's not a desert planet. Star Wars is filled with them. It's the most obvious choice to have a desert planet in your new Star Wars content. Anyway, Mando goes to a tavern and then some guys who are up to no good started making trouble in the neighborhood. He got in one small fight and that guy got scared and said,
"Is that a bounty puck? Is that me?"
"No, it's the other guy who looks just like you." "Who the fuck do you think it is, dipshit?"
I can bring you in warm. Or I can bring you in cold.
Or, you know, you could have forgone this entire conversation and just knocked him out, taken him to your ship, and put him on ice there. Instead, you make us sit through this awkward dialogue just so you could say some epic cool guy stuff? Moving on, Mando talks to some guy to call on a speeder. Why didn't you park your ship closer?
No droids.
Mando has a problem with droids. I wonder if that'll come up later, but right now, Mando's droid problem has sent away the good speeder. And what do they get in return? When they get to the ship, they are attacked by this thing they called a Ravenox. The blue guy, who is only known as the Mithril, seriously, they don't even give him a name, does nothing as the monster rushes towards him. This could have all been avoided if Mando had just parked closer.
I like your ship. She's classic. Razor Crest, am I right? Pre-Empire? How much are they paying you? True that you guys never take off your helmets? I think I have to use the vac tube. I mean, I can do it here. If you've never seen a fledgling Mithril evacuate your thorax.
Please shut the fuck up. Why aren't you telling him to shut up, Mando? Does this not annoy you? Anyway, the Mithril then pretends that he is molting in an attempt to escape. Mando then surprises him and freezes him in carbonite. Why didn't you do that when you got here? You've clearly frozen several other victims. Was this done solely for the cool factor? Just so you could have Mando teleport behind him like some kind of anime character? Anyway, now Mando arrives at his destination, another non-desert planet where he will hand in all of his bounties to the guild. Mando is then given a secret underground job where he must meet with his employer. The employer in question turns out to be none other than this guy who works for the Empire. So, this show takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, so the Empire shouldn't be able to act so freely. After all, if anyone saw them, that would spark some kind of reaction from the New Republic, right? Well, whatever, it's only a problem if they act out in the open, but that wouldn't happen, that would be silly. Mando is tasked with finding what they refer to as the asset. They give him some Beskar as a down payment, then tell him to bring it in alive. They actively make sure that Mando knows not to kill it. They then give him a tracking fob. How do these work exactly? Could they track Luke, Leia, Babu Frick? Apparently, tracking fobs require a chain code to track a target. A chain code is a set of biometric information about an entity, things like age, gender, species, and so on. So that can't get too specific, can it? Like, there could be 2 people who are 16 years old, 5'3", male, and have brown hair. Hell, there could even be hundreds of them. Millions, even. Though there is evidence of how this system works. Earlier, we saw some guild workers confirming the bounties to verify that they were the targets, so that would confirm that chain codes aren't that specific at all. Bounty hunters are given a puck showing the face of their target, as well as a code that will cause the fob to beep when near anyone who matches certain criteria. So it is absolutely necessary for bounty hunters to have a lot of information.
We can only provide the last 4 digits.
Their age? That's all you can give me?
Yes, they're 50 years old. We can also give you last reported positional data. A man of your skill should make short work of this.
How the fuck could anyone work with that small amount of information? There could be hundreds of people aged 50 in the general vicinity of that location. No one, no matter how talented, could find what you're looking for. It's like finding a needle in a needle stack. But also, you're sending him to find this asset. Mando's gonna find out what it is once he finds and retrieves it. So why are you hiding this information? You're making this task impossible for no discernible reason. Moving on, Mando is paid in advance with some Beskar that is branded with the mark of the Empire. Mando then takes this Beskar to the Mandalorian blacksmith so that she can make some armor. None of the other Mandalorians care about how Mando got this valuable metal, or why it has that mark on it, but that's a problem for a later episode. They have decided to make a pauldron, and that later it will have a signet revealed, whatever the hell that is. I guess we'll find out later.
This is extremely generous. The excess will sponsor many foundlings.
That's good. I was once a foundling.
I know.
Obviously she would know that, you dipshit. The fact that she knows would imply that she had met you when you were a foundling, which means you should know that she knows. Or are we to assume that he didn't know her, and that she just looked on from afar like some creepy old lady? But also, sponsoring foundlings, whatever that means, would be a good thing whether you were a foundling or not. Was this just here for the audience? As the pauldron is being forged, Mando has a flashback to when he was a kid. A small nod to the notion that his childhood may have been traumatic, but we don't see much of that at this moment. This show is intending to drip feed anything that might flesh out its main character. Moving on, Mando now heads to his destination, which happens to be, oh god damn it, another desert planet. But it's not any of the desert planets we've seen before. This one's called Arvala 7. So it's not Tatooine, Jakku, or whatever the fuck this one was. It's this new desert planet, completely indistinguishable from the others. Anyway, Mando has parked his ship in the middle of nowhere and is looking through a scope at a distant blurg. Why didn't you just shoot it with the weapon you already had pointing at it, you sloppy wank? Instead of using the weapon he was already aiming at it, he tries to use his Flammenwerfer to werf Flammen. This causes him to get both of his arms bitten into. I wonder if that's going to cause him some trouble later on. Mando, an allegedly highly skilled bounty hunter, had to be saved from these basic-ass enemies by some old guy riding on one. The old guy then decides to help Mando, then says, "I have spoken." Old guy who has spoken then says that many have seeked out the same target as Mando.
Did you help them?
Yes, they died.
Seems like you might not want this guy's help. Everyone else that he helped has perished. Get the fuck out of there.
Well, then I don't know if I want your help.
You do.
You don't decide what others want, you old fuck. The old guy is offering to guide Mando in exchange for half of the blurgs. He claims that Mando needs one of the blurgs to ride and that the way is impossible to pass without one. Except that Mando has a ship and a tracker. He could just fly over the obstacle. Also, as far as this story is concerned, the blurgs are absolutely necessary for this mission. This means that if Mando had killed the one in front of him, as he easily could have, he would have no blurg to ride through the canyon. In turn, this means that his big fuck-up earlier had to happen for the sake of the plot, and for no other reason. Anyway, Mando says that he doesn't know how to ride a blurg. The old man says,
I have spoken.
As if that somehow changes anything. Mando now has to learn how to ride a blurg because the old guy said so and he is too stupid to fly closer to his destination. But if he flies too close to the enemy base, they'll shoot him. Just because he can't land near where they can see him doesn't mean he has to park on the other side of some deadly canyon. And about that line,
I have spoken.
This is equivalent to someone saying, and that's final, whenever there's a dispute. All it does is take agency away from everyone else. Mando isn't even trying to talk back or enforce his position. This guy just said,
I have spoken.
and now everything is going his way. This guy just really likes to speak. And you know what they say about he who speaks?
He who speaks does not know.
It's usually bad practice to tell people what not to do when it comes to writing, but this, don't do this.
Do you have a land speeder or speeder bike that I could hire?
Just get in your ship, you dumb fuck. Mando then successfully rides the blurg, and they make it to the encampment. There he finds the bounty droid IG-11 is already there. He's looking for the same asset. IG-11 starts shooting at all the mooks, then Mando acts as if that's a problem, as if he wasn't going to do exactly that.
IG unit, stand down!
So, there is knockback when being shot with a blaster, even when wearing Beskar. Even though it did nothing earlier, Mando decides that he will work with IG-11. What about your hatred towards droids? Remember when you took a shitty speeder because you didn't want one with a droid? But now it seems like your issue is more of a mild distaste of them. I wonder if there will be any further inconsistencies. Why didn't you hear that? It was right behind you. IG-11 has decided to activate his self-destruct protocol. Mando tells him not to do it, so he doesn't. Now there's a turret in the fight, so Mando uses IG-11 as a distraction so that he can take the turret. Earlier, before he had the turret, Mando was trying his best to avoid getting shot because it seems that he understands that the armor doesn't protect his entire body. But now that he has the turret, getting shot is no longer an issue for him, regardless of how possible it still is.
You know, not so bad for a droid. That blaster hit looks nasty, you okay?
I guess he just doesn't hate droids that much. He's even worried about him. Now, the tracking fob leads them to a container. Upon opening it, Mando finds a baby of the same species as Yoda.
The commission was quite specific. The asset was to be terminated.
No, the job was to bring it in alive.
Upon delivery of the asset, alive.
Who told you to kill it? Was it someone other than Mando's employer? What even is the significance of this baby? Why did these guys even have it? Maybe there'll be some answers later on. One last thing before we move on to the next episode. It was astronomically lucky that this baby was the only 50-year-old in the area. The odds of that being the case are so low that I would judge this as an impossibility. The episode starts pretty much where the last one left off. Mando is now taking the plot baby back to his ship. As you can see, he is walking, on foot. Remember how important it was that he ride a blurg? Here's a great big fuck you to that. But as he is doing that, he gets ambushed. So if you had used that on the blurg, it would be dead. What a useful weapon that you decided not to use that one time. Mando has now found out that yet another person was after the plot baby. Later that night, Mando is seen tending to his wound, the one he got from the blurg. Plot baby tries to heal his wound using the Force. Oh no, not this shit. Mando doesn't let him because he has decided that the baby must stay in its cradle. But you know what, let's talk about the plot baby. He's 50 years old. He should be able to talk or at least communicate in some way. One does not have roughly human intelligence for 50 years without learning how to speak. They've tried to present it as if the species develops at a slower rate. This would mean that they are significantly less evolved than humans, and that the only reason Yoda is smarter is because he has lived a hell of a lot longer. It's funny to think that Yoda, a character who is known for being very wise, spent 50 years being a drooling baby. Moving on, Mando finds out that Jawas are scavenging his ship parts. This wouldn't have happened if he had just landed closer to his destination. Which means that this entire episode doesn't happen if the first one was written better. That's just fantastic work. This episode has very little to go for it. You suck! So I'll just give it a quick rundown. Mando tries to stop the Jawas and get his stuff back. He gets his ass kicked. He then tries to see if his ship still flies. It doesn't. He meets up with He Who Speaks.
I think it's a child.
No fucking shit. He Who Speaks takes Mando for a ride on this floating toboggan. I guess this wasn't available last episode. Instead, he had to learn how to ride a blurg. He Who Speaks takes Mando to bargain with the Jawas. The Jawas want an egg in return. But not just any egg, an egg from a mudhorn. Mando fights the mudhorn. He gets his chest crushed, but somehow takes no damage. His ribs should be broken. Mando gets saved by the plot baby because even literal babies can be powerful Force users. Mando gives the egg to the Jawas. They eat some goo out of it. Mando and He Who Speaks have no idea what the Force is, even though it has only been 5 years since the Emperor was defeated by a powerful Force user. Mando then fixes his ship and leaves. And that's it.
That's it? Where's the meat?
Nothing else of importance happens in that episode. Honestly, it's just filler. You could skip from episode 1 to 3 and you would miss very little. Mando is now on his way to deliver the plot baby. The plot baby then takes a little metal ball off a lever. Mando takes it from him as it is not a toy. This isn't relevant to anything, so there is no reason for me to have brought it up. Upon arriving at the Empire Remnant's hideout, some stormtroopers exit the building to greet them. Remember when I said it's only an issue if they act out in the open? Keep that in mind, we've only encountered one of the problems so far.
Easy with that. You take it easy.
Motherfucker, that is something your employer asked Mando to retrieve. You should be careful with it. Also, in what way was Mando not taking it easy? The only person doing anything wrong here is you, dipshit. Does that tracking fob have more than one chain code, or is he confirming that this child is in fact 50 years old? Yes, he is indeed the age I thought he would be. How very splendid. If they did actually have more of the chain code, why didn't they give it to Mando? Instead, they gave him a task of finding a 50-year-old last seen on a planet.
How many fobs did you give out?
I had to ensure its delivery.
So you were the one that hired IG-11? And that would mean that you told the bounty droid to kill the asset? Now tell me, how is that in any way ensuring its delivery? Moving on, Mando is given a lot of Beskar steel as his reward. All of it is marked with the symbol of the Empire. Apparently, the Empire performed a great purge, which is not only the reason they have Beskar metal, but also why the Mandalorians stay hidden. Upon handing in the Beskar to be smelted, other Mandalorians appear to have an issue with Mando's actions.
Our world was shattered by the Empire, with whom this coward shares tables.
This is a fair point. The Empire is the reason the Mandalorians have to hide away. The reason that there are so few of them despite the numbers they used to have.
Our secrecy is our survival. Our survival is our strength.
This is not a valid point to the issue. The issue is that there used to be more of you and that Mando has helped out those responsible for the loss. This isn't even being glass half full, it's just straight up saying that a bad thing is good. It's essentially saying, it's good that the Empire killed most of our comrades and drove us into hiding, because now we have secrecy. That's a pretty fucking stupid thing to say.
The Empire is no longer, and the Beskar has returned.
That doesn't change the fact that Mando worked with the enemy. Why do you keep making terrible points?
Have you ever removed your helmet?
No,
Has it ever been removed by others?
never.
The claim is that the only way to remain a Mandalorian is to keep your helmet on, to not have it removed by yourself or another. So if they sleep with their helmets on, could someone sneak in and take it off, thus expelling them from the tribe? That would have them expelled, right? That doesn't seem to be a good system. Blacksmith Lady then says, "This is the way," as if having never taken his helmet off has any bearing on whether or not his actions were treasonous. This is the way is yet another one of those conversation enders that this show likes so much. Because the characters conversing or having conflict on a plot point would involve some kind of character writing. Something this show is lacking so far. Moving on, Mando earns the Mudhorn as his signet. This is the only plot-relevant information gathered from Episode 2, and I would argue that if you had lost this plot point, very little would change. Mando, however, does not want the signet, so she makes some whistling birds instead.
Use them sparingly, for they are rare.
You just made them, what are you talking about? they would be no rarer than the Beskar you forged them with. Also, on a tangential note, Mando's armor is made out of Beskar. Couldn't they melt down his old armor and forge it into something else? Is Beskar not recyclable? Well, maybe they aren't doing that because they don't have the means to. You know what? Maybe you're right, Straw Nerd number 15. I'll drop this point, unless of course something happens later that brings it back up. As he watches the forging of his new equipment, he has a flashback of his traumatic youth. This seems to just happen every time he witnesses some forging. In this flashback, more details are given about what happened. He was almost killed by a super battle droid. Remember the prequels? This is why he doesn't like droids, which is fairly reasonable. One would be very wary of something that almost killed them. Don't think too much about his interactions with IG-11. That is absolutely the way someone with a trauma would act when dealing with said trauma. Moving on, Mando enters the guild equipped with his new armor. The guildmaster praises Mando for being super cool and succeeding in the mission. He also states that everyone else in the guild is jealous of his achievements.
How many of them had tracking fobs?
All of them. All of them!
Every single member of the guild was given a fob to track a 50-year-old. But it's important to note that this is the third time Mando has been informed that others are able to track the plot baby. But at least this time he knows that everyone can do it. I hope nothing happens that calls attention to this. Mando tries to go on his next hunt.
Any idea what they're gonna do with it?
You should have asked the Empire about that. They probably wouldn't have told you, but they're the only ones who could have told you. Think about it. If the reason you didn't ask them was because you thought they wouldn't tell you, why would you think they'd tell anyone else? It's almost like this dialogue is here to tell the audience that Mando is still thinking about the plot baby. When Mando gets to his ship, he sees the removed ball. This is what prompts him to try to save the plot baby. So the only reason he has a change of heart is because he didn't put the ball back. Hell, if the baby didn't take the ball in the first place, it would have been in its place and Mando would have just left. Moving on, Mando goes to save the plot baby. He then encounters Glasses Guy. I don't know his name, so don't ask me.
I protected him. If it wasn't for me, he would already be dead, please.
Why would they do that? Didn't they want the plot baby for some purpose? You're the only one they have working with this, so whatever you're doing is because they want you to do it. Otherwise, why are you even here? With plot baby in hand, Mando tries to leave, but he is surrounded by stormtroopers. He then uses his whistling birds to perfectly take out 4 of them. Do these things have heat seekers, or does Mando choose who they target? Because if they have heat seeking, he is pretty lucky they didn't hit the baby. As Mando leaves the Empire's hideout, he is being tracked, or more specifically, the child is being tracked, as we know that everyone already has the fobs for him.
All of them. All of them!
Though I guess they're still limited to only tracking the age, which means they should have no way to find him.
Can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread.
Or they were given more of the chain code, except that the Bounty Hunter Guild shouldn't know about this event. Nor should there have been any time to give them the updated chain code. The Bounty Hunters just know what Mando did immediately, because their fobs just started beeping. This doesn't necessarily mean that Mando did anything. For all they know, the Empire Remnant is just relocating the asset. Or are we to assume that the Remnant sent out the chain code to all of them wirelessly? In this short amount of time, and they just so happen to know what this means? As far as I can tell, they assume Mando betrayed them because plot. Mando kills several members of the guild trying to get to his ship. As he begins to get overwhelmed, the other Mandalorians arrive to help.
You're going to have to relocate the covert.
It makes sense that the Mandalorians will have to hide somewhere else now that they've blown their cover. Though I wonder if something will happen later that calls attention to this. When Mando gets to his ship, he is surprised to find out that his boss, who knew where he was going, was waiting for him. Moments ago, he was with the other guild members in that big fight. I guess Mando just didn't see him walk over to his ship only a short while ahead of him.
I didn't want it to come to this, but then you broke the code.
If that code is honor your agreements, then yes, he did. He also killed several of your guild members, but I guess that isn't that important. But honestly, the code is way better than keep your helmet on or you're not one of us. Mando shoots his boss, but the boss survives because he still had some Beskar in his pocket. Ah, the old, I survived being shot because I always have my Bible trope.
Oh, lucky I was wearing an extra large piece of the true cross today. I think I'll go inside.
Mando then gives the child the ball, the plot device that caused this entire episode as well as all future episodes. Fuck me, that's dumb.
I have spoken.
You need to shut the fuck